Welcome to White Wisteria Academy series, Interview with an Expert. Today we will be talking about vocal confidence with Sylvie Lui. So in my work, I talk a lot about soft skills and how they can all massively improve if you work at them. And I believe that being able to use your voice in order to be heard is a very important skill. And our voice plays a super important role in how we are perceived. And despite being such an amazing tool to connect with other people, I think it's massively underutilized. So today I wanted to speak to Sylvie Lui to gain some valuable insight into how we can use our voice to come across as confident and assertive, which is very important in a life of a clinical research associate, as well as everyone else really. Sylvie is a Chinese Canadian voice coach based in London, UK. Her expertise is in vocal performance for effective communication and public speaking. She specializes in inclusivity and diversity and teaches with an intercultural and international perspective geared towards those who are working in international workspaces. She is highly sought after for her voice and communications workshops, as well as for her private training in areas such as vocal and public speaking confidence coaching, personal effectiveness in communication, advanced interviewing skills, accent reduction and vocal techniques, and many more. Sylvie, thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, as I mentioned earlier, coming across as confident and assertive is super important in the life of a clinical research associate. But what is vocal confidence? How can it help us, and why do we need it?
Well, vocal confidence is really how you feel when you speak. And basically, when you feel good about what you are saying, and a lot of us will find this in different parts of our life, but in the parts where you find it most difficult, if you can work on the skill to get good so that feel really confident in how you communicate and how you use your voice, and also the relationship you have to your own voice, that is really what is all encompassed as vocal confidence.
Mhm.
And to be able to get vocal confidence, we need to become aware of how we use our voices, how we communicate with other people first, before we know what we need to do with our voices. So that's why people come to find me, somebody who's a voice coach, to help them work on it, because I see things that they don't see, or that they feel emotions, but they don't really know what's going on in their voice, or that a lot of the time people think about the feedback that they have from other people and they take it on as the real thing. However, it might not actually be the real thing, because everybody's feedback is subjective. So we do kind of need to take a look at what's actually going on in your voice, what's going on in your body language when you are
Mhm.
speaking, body tension, and how that impacts how your voice is coming out, and then also what's going on when you are having the two-way communication with the perception of the other person as well. So that's kind of what we kind of look at in terms of building vocal confidence.
Okay, yes, that's super interesting. I guess to kind of solve a problem, first you have to isolate it, right? So just to kind of talk more about the habits and how do we use our voice in our body as a tool, because I think anybody who hasn't been really coached on how to use their voice is just falling into a habit of just using it and not thinking really about it. And um, I think knowing how you are using it is then a kind of opening doors for how you can actually improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that there are very common things that happen with people's voices, but there's also things that are very individualistic to each person as well, because we all have different personalities. So we all have different communication styles. So each person will have something different to work on. But in terms of what we think about when we're speaking, a lot of us don't really think about what our voices are. We maybe think that, oh, I don't like my voicemail, I don't like hearing
Yeah.
my voice, don't like seeing myself recorded, but then that's also not all positive at the same time. So when we kind of start to look at what can I do with my voice, how do I make more impact, how do I connect with other people better, how do I, involve my voice in this presentation a little bit more and a little
Mhm.
bit less from the logic or thinking about what needs to be perfect on this PowerPoint. When we start to think about all these different little things, like the quality of your voice, you can think about the intonation, you can think about the tone, you can think about the volume you use. You can think about the rhythm in which you speak, especially if you speak a different language and you have a different accent on top of the English. Are we speaking too quickly? Are we really involving the audience in how we are using our voice? We have to think about all these different things because a lot of the time our audiences are very diverse, which means that if we don't speak English as a native language to for number one, that means that all of the different qualities that kind of come onto our English might be too quick for somebody to understand, but they don't know that only we speak in the way that we speak because it's familiar to us. Now, even as a native speaker, there are things that we speak too quickly because we think very quickly, and everything that comes to our mind we want out of our mouth right away. So
Yeah.
when we kind of have that as well, there's a lot of different things to work on. So depending on how many different difficulties that we have because of who we are, we have to start to look at them on a different layers and one at a time so that we can start to understand, okay, which is my priority to fix right now? Is it that people don't understand me? I'm not clear, because that would be number one for me. It's not necessarily about shifting an accent just because I want to aesthetically sound different, but
Mhm.
it's really about, am I connecting with the people? Am
Mhm.
I making sense to even the message itself? Am I connected to what I am saying? Because a lot of the time, I'm sure we've all been in meetings and presentations where people are speaking, but you're just getting bored, but you don't know
Mhm.
why. And a lot of the time, it's not just because it's dry content, but because the person is also not invested enough and committed enough into putting their emotions inside that delivery so that you want to catch on to the story, the storytelling aspect as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think kind of when somebody seems disengaged from their voice or from what they are saying, it kind of feels like you can't connect either to what they are saying. And then let's say
Mm,
if it's a presentation, then it might sound kind of boring or just you don't want to even listen to it. But I think what you said earlier as well is so important. Is kind of like when you think about your voice, that is a tool to kind of connect and to put the message across rather than, oh, I don't like my voice because blah blah blah. And so many people don't like their voices, but I think if you focus on, but I'm using it to kind of really convey the message, and then you can use your voice as well to let's say stress certain points or kind of certain words or show emotion. I think like you mentioned, it's just changing the whole thing, isn't it? Because then you won't
yeah.
be really thinking, oh, do I like my voice or how does it sound? You will be just like, no, this is the way that is enabling me to actually convey the message across properly.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the thing is, if we don't have a good relationship to our voice, we're never going to like it, which means that there's always going to be a tinge of something underneath how you are speaking because you don't like your voice, right? So
Mhm.
when we can learn to understand what our voice is and start to embrace it a little bit more, because also what we hear inside our heads is so different from what comes out into the world.
Mhm.
And when we realize that, that's a huge, huge game changer as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm absolutely with you. Once you have that, it's so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of awareness helps always, right? Um,
Mhm,
so in our work, there is a lot of kind of scenarios where we need to make a great first impression. But usually for example, for clinical research associates, that would be when you meet your colleagues for the first time, or when you travel to a site to monitor and you meet new site staff, or even when you go for an interview. So you kind of go to a place that you're not familiar with. Um, but it is invaluable that you actually come across as confident. Do you have some tips on how we can use our vocal confidence and kind of make sure that we come across confident in this, scenario of first impressions?
Okay, well, when you're thinking about meeting somebody new, I think there's sometimes a lot of anxiety inside each of us. I mean, unless you are the person who loves networking,
Mhm.
we usually feel like, oh my goodness, and we're starting to hold already. We're starting to hold our breath. We're starting to hold our bodies, and until we understand that, I can actually let go, which is maybe
Mhm.
through an exhale.
Mhm.
and you just kind of let it go. Maybe it might take maybe 2 minutes of breathing for you, but if you practice it over time, it gets a little bit quicker. But just to ensure that you feel really nice and easy in your body as you are approaching the situation, whether that means logging on to a call to network with people and meet people, or whether that means walking up to somebody and having them face to face with you. It's exactly the same inside our bodies, depending on what you are most comfortable with. But when you first open your mouth to say hello, the first impression that we get from people, if it's a nice open hello, it's nice to meet you, and
Mhm.
that you're invested in that, people usually respond better. But if you're a little bit tentative and you're kind of still holding, you haven't let go, it might sound like, hello, my name is Sylvie, and then it sounds like I don't really want to be there.
Mhm.
So when you start to think about that, maybe reflecting on a moment in your life where you really like speaking to let's just say a friend that and you say, "Hi, it's really great to see you again," right?
Mhm.
It's a completely different feeling than coming to a stranger. But once you understand the two extreme different feelings of that, you can bridge the gap in the middle to find something that feels like it, even though it feels like it's a little bit fake in the beginning, but at
Mhm.
least you're coming across a little bit more open. And
Mhm.
when you ask a lot of open questions to be curious about the other person, usually that helps a lot, but always in balance. Otherwise, it'll sound like you're prying a little bit.
Mhm.
But really about having an open voice, a nice grounded body, that's a great way, with a little nice smile as well, because it does warm up your sound a little bit. And also, if you kind of just lift the corners of your mouth slowly, you probably will become, sorry, probably slowly you will become smiling in that conversation,
Mhm.
just because that you're actually trying to want to be in that situation.
Mhm.
And you never know what type of communication you will get from the other person as well.
Mhm.
And when you understand the response and the reaction and you enjoy it, that's really where it's going to take off, where you don't have to think about it anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Smile always helps, right? My little trick is that I kind of try to arrive thinking, "Oh, I'm so glad that I finally met you." It kind of like it just puts me in the zone of positivity, and yeah, was looking forward to this moment, and then I kind of try to create that excitement a little bit. Yeah. Um, so I want to talk about common mistakes. So what would you say are the things that you kind of notice interacting with people who didn't have any previous voice coaching? I know that, for example, when I was recording my online courses, I noticed that I was putting a lot of kind of upward inflection on my statements. So only kind of after recording myself and then reviewing the content, I noticed this trend and I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't make any sense because obviously online content will be consumed later. So not only it kind of sounds like I'm asking questions when I'm really just, offering statements. And then obviously the audience is not going to answer at that time when I'm actually saying this. So I had to kind of like retrain myself to actually be doing downward inflection with the statements rather than upward inflection with the statements. um, but what are the most common mistakes that you notice?
I think infection is a huge one, but it really depends on where you're based and the culture and the accents you're around. I mean, like in a place like Australia, it will always go up and it's a normal thing, and they will be
Yeah.
seen as statements because they're used to it. Same with California, same with a lot of the west coast of North America.
Mhm.
But in the UK, it is a little bit different. It's kind of seen as a question all the time if you go
Yeah.
up. And I've actually had a lot of clients who've come to me, especially if they're female, and maybe somebody who's their superior has told them, "Oh, if you actually get this downward intonation, it's going to help you so much," especially in financial services and that type of thing.
Mhm.
And it's a really, really hard thing to retrain because it's a huge part of your ingrained system of asking questions in a certain way. But
Mhm.
you do get a lot more authority and credibility and gravitas in your voice by
Exactly.
understanding that. However, it feels very aggressive when you start to feel it because your voice is not used to kind of going down all the time. Even as Canadians, we usually count upwards, one, two, three, but Americans will learn to count from down, one, two, three.
Oh
And so
yeah,
for us,
that's interesting.
yeah,
I never thought of it.
yeah, once you recognize that, and that's why I say the cultural thing about it,
Mhm.
which is also why we perceive Americans to be very, very direct, especially with always downward intonation, more volume, and that type of thing. So another thing is a lot of people think that they're monotonous, but they're not.
Mhm.
It's actually very hard to be monotonous. So you would have to speak like this to be monotonous, right? Sounds like a robot, but a lot of people will say that, oh, my presentations are so bad. I'm so monotonous. But
Mhm.
really, it's just a smaller range of intonation that they use. Some people are completely off the charts, knowing that I'm monotonous, but there is no monotony at all. And some people will say, I'm kind of, in between here and here. But
Mhm.
really, they're speaking normally and there's a lot of intonation in there. So
Mhm.
again, it's about understanding what that means. Because again, when people give you feedback and they tell you that, then you believe them because you won't know unless you do a lot of work with your voice. You won't
Mhm.
know until you record yourself and play back to hear it.
Yeah.
But then a lot of our mind tricks happen, especially if people have told us stuff or we don't really know how to listen to it or
Mhm.
how to see it and how to analyze it. And that's when you really understand that, oh, I might need a little bit of extra help that might help me to kind of bust that myth for myself and know that
Yeah.
the way that I speak is okay. And that's kind of where, again, links back to vocal confidence.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so cool. Very, very important knowledge here. Now for some practical tips. So we spoke about first impressions when you meet people in person, but obviously in the current climate, we had to kind of switch to meetings for the first time over the phone. And I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you had any kind of tips on how to maybe warm up our voice before we pick up the phone. So I know for myself, I have a couple of tricks. One of them is drinking water. And then the other is I don't want to be kind of gasping for air. So my home office is on the second floor. And if, let's say, I start the conversation on the phone and then I kind of go up the stairs, I'm literally gasping for air. And I know that this is not the most ideal way to be kind of, meeting somebody over the phone for the first time. If that happens and somebody calls me and I don't really have a choice to kind of run up the stairs and then, have a couple of breaths before, I will kind of say, I'm sorry, I'm short of, I'm gasping for air because I was just going up the stairs. So I think kind of like explaining it takes the edge of it. But yeah, what are your tips on how to kind of appear confident over the phone?
Is that the first thing you say when you answer the phone? Or
If I kind of manage to say a sentence without gasping for air, but then I do have to gasp for air, then I will kind of say what's happening so that the person doesn't really think that this is, how I speak because it's so nice.
okay. Okay, so to be confident when you answer the phone is to be grounded and easy again in your breath because, again, that affects your voice, right? So, usually, if you know that you're calling somebody, you have the time to check into your breath to make sure you feel nice and relaxed.
Mhm.
Sometimes, what I like to do is even speak the words out loud first, at least a couple of times, and over
Okay, that's very helpful.
articulate because then your mouth gets used to moving around.
Mhm.
Especially if you've done a lot of research and you haven't been talking to anybody, your
Mhm.
mouth isn't used to speaking to people. You're not used to using your voice in the last half hour, in the last hour. So by speaking it
Yeah.
out loud and doing it a few times and over articulating, over pronouncing those words, it does help your mouth to kind of get around it. And then you'll
Mhm.
sound a little bit more confident, especially when you're speaking for the first time.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is that smile. That smile brings a warmth to your
Mhm.
sound, which makes it a little bit more inviting because people can't see you. And another one that I really like is just to really sit down and focus on something. Don't kind of notice a pen and start to play with it because that takes away the engagement of the
Mhm.
focus. And therefore, if you're focused on something else, you can tell in someone's voice. And
Yes.
because you don't have video, you're not
Mhm.
seeing them in person, you're not sensing them.
Mhm.
Your senses are heightened to only the listening portion of listening to their sound, and you can hear when it starts to deviate, when they're interested, when they're not interested. And so that's a very, very important part, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, it always helps, I guess, to make the other person feel like they are in your focus. They are the most important for that moment rather than you're kind of,
Mm.
yeah, you're talking on like on the side to them, but really you're kind of playing with that pen. That is more
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, or even staring out the window and kind of daydreaming. You can tell that the
Yeah.
person is not engaged in their voice. There's no vocal presence in it. So
Mhm.
you can tell that, okay, well, I don't know why they're not interested. They might be interested, but because your voice shows up that way,
Mhm.
then they kind of pick whatever it is that they pick up from it, unless you have a chat about it, right?
There are so many things that we can just pick up, right? When we kind
Mm.
of don't really focus on it and focus on that person on the other side of the phone, somehow, even though obviously we won't say it, it will kind of transpire, right?
Yeah.
So when kind of starting a new habit, I advocate always small steps. So do you have any last tips on some things that we can do that is really easy, but we can improve our vocal confidence with those little things?
Yeah, well, one huge thing is how many times do you hold your breath in a day? Because we hold our breath just thinking. Yeah. And we can hold our breath when we're just sitting here waiting for things. And we can hold our breath when we are writing. We can hold our breath just any point of time inside of one whole day. How many times do you hold your breath and how long do you hold it for? Do you even notice? A lot of us don't even notice it. When
Mhm.
you're listening for a sound, are you holding your breath? Do we
Yeah.
need to be? Right? Once we start to work on that, that kind of helps you to break a lot of the other habits, which are the breathing habits. Because if we don't have these little tiny things to understand and to work on, they will still affect the overall work on your voice. So that's one thing that's really nice. In terms of just even recording your voice and listening to it,
Mhm.
building that relationship to your voice is really, really key. So if you have the opportunity to do voice notes and then kind of listen to them, or
Mhm.
record yourself on Zoom when you're on a presentation so you can see how you're coming across. As much as we don't like watching ourselves or
Mhm.
hearing back what we sound like and what we look like, it does help you to kind of build on the process to know what can I actually improve. It
Mhm.
does take a lot of time to get rid of that judgment voice when you're watching it or when you're listening to it. But if you play it enough times over and over, it will start to become white noise and you'll start to see
Mhm.
things rather than just hearing your voice. If you're really, really focused on that, then that's really what you'll be focused on. But try
Mhm.
to kind of step away from that. Maybe take a few days before you go back to watch it, because when
Mhm.
we're delivering, it's very different than when we watch back. And so if you have
Yeah.
some time in between to kind of like just relax, it does help
Mhm.
quite a bit.
Mhm. I think as you kind of watch more and more, you will become more accepting, and kind of some things that you would normally be like, oh my gosh, this is not great. You will just say, yeah, it is fine. I know I've gone through that journey and I got
Yeah,
there,
no,
so I can assure
absolutely.
you it'll happen.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this was fantastic, Sylvie. Thank you so much for all of this insight and great tips and advice. If people want to connect with you, where can we find you?
Oh, I'm all over social media, but I'll start off with my website. If you want to learn a little bit more about why I speak about these things and where I come from and how I speak about these things, my website is voicetraininginlondon.co.uk, and you can find the contact forms or anything to get a hold of me. Otherwise, the email address is info@voicetraininginlondon.co.uk. If you are interested in kind of learning more on a daily basis, I do post quite often, about four or five times a week, on LinkedIn. So you can find me Sylvie Lui, MFA FRSA on there. And if you are on Instagram or Facebook, I am on there as SLVC Voice Coach. With the new platform Clubhouse, if you're interested in listening in on conversations or joining the conversation about voice, please do join me on Clubhouse. I'm under the same handle, and we're on there every Friday at 4 p.m. UK time. So all these different discussions, each week we have a new different topic to talk about that I post about all the time. And yeah, I think that would be it. Yes.
Lovely. Thank you so much. This is just a fascinating subject. So, yeah, thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
I hope that my conversation with Sylvie gave you some interesting insight into how you can use your voice to come across confident and assertive. Um, Now, how does that apply to a clinical research associate role? So, like Sylvie was saying, being aware of your own situation and everything that we bring into a conversation will help you to not only connect more to your own voice, but also to the person who you are speaking to. We all seem to be more critical towards our own voice, but if we start looking at our voice as a tool to convey the message or stress most important content that we want to put across, then we will become more accepting. When meeting someone new, smile, um, kind of be positive, and make sure that you say the very first sentence with positivity and confidence, and then this will kind of continue. So it definitely is a great start to make a first conversation and to make that first great impression. When speaking on the phone, make sure that you're grounded in your voice. Make sure that you're hydrated and calm. Focus on the conversation that you are having. Focus on that person who is on the other side of the phone line. Because as Sylvie was saying, if you focus on something else, let's say, for example, on a pen that is lying on your desk, that will kind of transpire. We obviously won't say it with our words, but our voice will kind of give that away. So make sure that that conversation is your sole focus when you're on the phone. And when you pick up a phone, definitely kind of smile as well when you start speaking, because this will also transpire. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have gained some valuable insight and tips that you can implement right away. If you are interested in more tips, then make sure that you sign up to our monthly newsletter. You can sign up on our website, whitewistariaacademy.com, and follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at White Wisteria Academy. Thank you so much for joining us, and speak to you soon.